All right, greetings, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Favorite Funny. And we're the new video cast. I'm Carl Kozlowski. We're the new video cast where every week I ask a different famous person their favorite funny life stories and career stories, and also their favorite funny books, movies, TV shows, etc. And today, my very special guest is a guy that I've been honored to have as a friend for quite some time now. He's a brilliant stand-up comic and an even greater comedy writer. His name is Brian Kiley, and he was one of David Letterman's final comics during the last month that Letterman was on the air, which is indeed a high honor to be picked by Dave as one of the people to put on such a momentous period. And he's also the head monologue writer for Conan O'Brien on Conan's talk show on TBS. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Brian Kiley. Okay, anyway. So how are you, Brian?
I'm good, Carl. How are you?
Like the audience? Yeah, they're great.
They're very good.
Yeah. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Like, how are things these days with the show? I mean, is there it looks like you're at home chilling out. So I mean, are you able to do everything from there, I take it, or?
I am. Yeah, we haven't, we haven't been in for a year, so
Wow.
we're all writing from home. So yeah.
Yeah. And is there any light at the end of the tunnel on that? I hear that California is planning to be fully open in June. Have you guys heard anything about that?
Um, well, the show's ending in June, so
Oh, okay. I forgot.
we're kind of we're timing it perfectly.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So how do you feel about the ending? I mean, I did hear about that, and I drew an honest blank. I've been taping these all day, so but yeah. How do you feel? Because you've been with the show pretty much the entire run, right?
I started 6 months in, so I've been there 27 years.
Wow.
So yes, I'm sad, very sad to see it go. Although Conan is getting a new show on HBO Max next year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what that show is going to be. I don't know the details, but I just know that this show's ending at the end of June, and I don't know.
Finding the show at HBO. Are you going to be on there? Or have you been told
I
yet?
don't know. I don't
Uh-huh.
know. I don't know what the show's going to be and if I'm going to be part of it or not. So
Yeah.
if you hear anything, let me know. That would be great.
Yeah. Conan, definitely. I've got lunch tomorrow with him,
Good,
so
good.
yeah, we're both going to laugh at how he won't talk to you. You know, yeah. I mean, he knows where it's at. Yeah. So I guess I mean, what has been before we get into all the funny life stories? I mean, I figure people are probably curious. What is the day to day like in pulling off, still managing to do a show? Is it vastly different, or is it pretty much the same thing? Just write the jokes, funnel them down there, and that's that, or is there some big fundamental difference that perhaps we're not aware of?
Well, he hasn't been doing a monologue really for almost a year because there's no audience. So
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
initially he was, and then he just felt too strange doing jokes to, you know, Andy or no one. If originally he was just doing the show from his house. So um, yes, he. So we've been writing other sketches and other bits, and it's tricky because we can't. You can't have actors unless they're in the same house and all that kind of stuff. So it's been very tricky, kind of adjusting, but we're
Yeah.
doing okay, I think.
Yeah. So how did you wind up getting the job to begin with? I mean, had you worked in television before, or was that a totally new realm for you?
Um, the I It really was new. There was a show called Sunday Comics, uh, that was on. That was like, I don't even know what it was on, but my friend Lenny Clark hosted for a while, and he asked me to submit jokes, so I would submit a few jokes for him for doing like an opening monologue. But really, I just had been doing stand-up for a long time, and I did a lot of topical jokes in my act. So they were looking for someone to write his monologue. So they contacted me, and I sent in a packet, and I sent them about 50 jokes, and they said, "Yeah, okay, you start tomorrow." So I've been there ever since.
Huh. Okay. And like, there's been a lot of, a few different eras. I mean, there was the late night show, and then for like about 17 years, and then there was the Tonight Show, with that whole, unfortunate period, and then you've been on TBS the last 10 years. So what's some fundamental way that the show has changed in your perspective as an insider over the years, and or are you surprised that through it all perhaps it's stayed the same in fundamental ways?
Well, I think there've been different iterations of the show. I think, I think with the Tonight Show had such a long history of having a long monologue. Johnny did a long monologue, and so did Jay.
Yeah.
I think Conan felt that he should, and then we ramped up the number of monologue writers, and he did a long monologue. But I don't think that was, I think doing the show on TBS was much more back to the kind of show he wanted to do. So, and the kind of comedy he wanted to do. So I think the comedy's changed. I think in the old show in New York, there was a lot of desk bits with stuff about celebrities and whatever. And I think we've gotten away from that the last 10 years and done sketches and done whatever. But I've always thought the show was funny all the way through, even with the changes and whatever. So
Yeah. Okay. So
I think you have to keep changing and adapt, because otherwise it just gets stale. You don't want to be doing, it's the same thing with your stand-up act. You always want to be, you can't change it overnight, but you always want to be, it's always sort of a work in progress, and it's always changing,
gotcha. So what would you say looking back? Do you have like a favorite funny moment or two from the show, like either something that you're really proud of was funny on the air, or also, I guess, anything that went wrong that was really funny, either that people may not even notice because it was behind the scenes, or for or not necessarily behind the scenes, but not so much public view, like like there was planned bits that are funny. What's a couple of the funniest ones, and what are some things that surprised you?
Um, well, um, that's a good question. There's so many of the so many of the favorite bits are bits that aren't mine that I just enjoyed on the show.
Sure.
But I guess I remember when I was first there, Adam West was lost. Adam West used to play Batman when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
He got lost, and he was looking for the bathroom, and he couldn't find it, and he was kind of wandering around and just having to help him to show him where the bathroom was like, oh, you're Batman, you should be able to find the bathroom. I don't know.
Not exactly a childhood dream fulfilled.
No, it was just kind of funny of like, oh, you don't want to meet your heroes,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry, I feel like I'm totally blanking here.
We can move on to other questions and
Yeah,
come back to
let's
it.
get back to that. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Oh my God.
No problem. So, well, among your career highlights, I mean, what would you say, before we touch on the ultimate one that you gave me off our prep list, but starting out, how did you first get into stand-up, and what was the first moment where, you realized, hey, I could actually make it?
I started when I was in college, and I always, I loved comedy, and I used to write books when I was younger in case I needed them someday. And I guess, it's funny. I guess one of the early things that happened to me was, I got to open for Seinfeld early on, and he coming out in front of a crowd in Boston and telling them how funny I was or whatever with bookers there and so on, that kind of gave me some street cred, so to speak.
Yeah, that's great.
And that was one moment that kind of stood out for me of like, oh, and I think even just having other comics, older veteran comics, Barry Crimmins and Stephen Wright and people like that kind of encouraged me. That made me feel like I was on the right track, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And how about a funny moment where you bombed? I mean, is there any like
Oh yeah, they're not
jumps out at
funny,
you?
but there's so there's many incidents. I remember there was this one club where the other person didn't show up, and I had to just, I had to do like an hour, and I didn't have an hour or whatever. And so I'm up there stretching or whatever, and I remember I ordered a beer from the waitress, and I had to pay for the beer on stage in the middle of
Oh
my
God.
set. I had to take out my wallet, and it was like $1.50, and be like, here's, $2 or whatever. And the crowd was kind of like, oh, like even they kind of felt bad for me.
You have to take a collection for the tip. That's not a good moment.
I remember doing a show that was really a great show, except there were 3 women in the front that were just staring at me, almost glaring at me my whole set. And the rest of the crowd was so good, and I had momentum, so I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to break up the momentum, so I just kind of kept going. But it was bothering. I'm like, did I offend them? And what was wrong? And then I came off, and the woman who booked the show was like, "Oh, that was a great set. I hope those 3 women in the front row from Germany didn't throw you off." And it's like, let me know
awesome.
if something like that's happening.
Yeah. So has there been any moments with Conan on a personal level that have been unusual or funny that you could share?
Well, here's the crazy thing. So Conan and I went to the same Sunday school when we were kids.
Oh, really?
Wow. I was in his brother's class and he was in my brother's class. So I kind of had like a vague memory of who he was, even though I don't remember talking to him at anything in those, we were little kids and we were in separate classes or whatever. But I used to sit next to his brother Luke, and we would talk about football before the nun came in and taught us religion. It's funny that he and I, we have we'd be in the meetings, and he would always ask me about the Red Sox game the night before, or we'd have like our Boston sports talk before every meeting, and everyone's always like, "Oh, these like no one else is interested." Even so he's often making references to things that no one else knows what we're talking about, where like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've only had one. I tend to have disastrous experiences when I meet famous people, and like people say I'm like a real life Curb Your Enthusiasm version of Larry David. And the only time I've ever seen Conan up close, and I have an amazing magnetic ability to stumble into the wrong moments and find people in Hollywood when I lived there. But one time I came out of the ArcLight Hollywood movie theater, and there's this long line of people waiting to validate their tickets. And I guess this speaks to him being a down-to-earth guy. I never saw any other celebrity in line that I ever recall. And he just stood in line like everyone else, about 20 people deep and several steps up in this line. And it's like he's trying to be really quiet and kind of look down. But it's like, it's Conan O'Brien. He's like 6'15" and has, the hair you can miss from a mile away. And so I look, and my jaw drops for a second, because I'm thinking, ooh, I need to go say hi or hit him up, like be on my podcast or something. And he just shot me this look like, not tonight, please, for the love of God, not tonight. And I just turned and walked away in shame. But I mean, I hear he might have just been very down to earth and just simply wanted to blend in,
Oh, he's a great guy. He's a great guy. He's so funny, and he really has a brilliant mind. He
yeah,
really does.
So then, what was it like doing Letterman in that final month? I mean, was it? I mean, my impression was that he was getting to choose. Not relying on bookers. Probably that last month, I would think it had to be that he's putting on his favorite people. So
Well,
that had to be a real honor, I would think.
it was. I have to say, so what happened to me was when I was 25, I auditioned for the Letterman show, and they told me I was very good. And then I got on the show 17 years later. They called me 17 years later out of the blue and said, "Hey, can you do the show today?"
Were you waiting the whole time by the phone, or?
I just assumed that it was. I didn't even know I was in the running. I just thought. And what happened was Dave got sick, and Bruce Willis was supposed to be the first guest, so they had to have Bruce Willis host. So they needed an extra guest. So they
Oh, I
called
want to watch that. Wow.
and said, "Hey, can you come over?" And and it was like 1:30, and I came over, and they taped it. I don't know, 4:30 or 5 or whatever. But so then after that, I kind of got on. I got on flute, and then after that, they would they would call me in an emergency, like, "Hey, somebody canceled. Can you do the show tomorrow, or can you do the show today, or whatever?" So it wasn't until I moved to LA that they actually gave me a date, because once I was out here, I couldn't be the last minute guy. But I was very touched that that he would have me as one of the last comedians.
Yeah,
So was yes, that was that probably my biggest honor, I would say.
that's great. So, any perceptions of him or recollections of him that that you can share without causing a problem for yourself, but that people may
Well,
not be aware of? Something about Dave.
well, you really get very little time with, like, he would come over at the end of your set and shake your hand, and that would be on camera saying, "Hey, good job," or whatever. And then they would say, that they'd go to commercial, and uh, he was gonna. Usually, I was the second guest, and they were gonna bring on a band or something.
Yeah,
So he would say, I would just say, "How's your son doing?" Or he'd say, "How's Conan?" or something like that. And we had about 30 seconds of conversation, and that was it. But the weirdest thing happened one time was I was on. They did a week of having U2 on, so they had the show on Friday. It was Jason Segel and me, and then U2. So the U2 guys took up and Jason Segel took up all the dressing rooms. So when I got there, they're like, "Hey, we don't have a dressing room for you today. So you're just going to be in the green room." And I'm like, "Okay." So the green room's on the first floor. The dressing rooms are on the third or fourth or fifth floor, whatever. So they came up to me before my set and said, "Hey, do you mind if U2 hangs out in your dressing room on while you're on?" So I said, "Listen, you tell those Irish sons of bitches." No. So I was like, "Sure, of course." So I go out and I do my set, and I come off and I go in the green room, which is my dressing room, and it's just the 4 members of U2 and me. And it was like the most surreal moment of my life. So I go in there, I'm in a room just with U2, and they all introduce themselves, and they're like, "Hi, I'm Adam, hi, I'm Bono." It's like, "Yeah, I know who you are." And then my favorite was The Edge said, "Hi, I'm The Edge. Nice to meet you, The Edge." So they had to set up for U2. So for like 10 minutes, I'm in a room, just U2 and me. And we just kind of talked about, it's 5 dads. So we just talked about our kids. And,
yeah.
and it was very odd and surreal, but cool.
Well, I had a weird experience with Bono.
Let me guess.
This
He was trying to get
like
his parking ticket validated.
did I what?
He
Oh,
was
did you get his parking validated? Yeah. No, it
I
was
love it if all your celebrity stories are them waiting in line to get their parking tickets validated.
yeah, I've got a few of those, but I'll save them for my next video cast. Where it get validated by Carl Kozlowski. But no, there was when I was in college, U2 came to town in Dallas. I was at TCU, and I was the entertainment editor of our school paper. So I really advanced a lot. I had the same job my entire life, but I had basically we got a call saying, can you guys send a photographer if you want to take pictures of the U2 concert? And no photographer was around. And of course, I'm not going to miss that opportunity. So I, jumped on the opportunity. I find out how to get backstage. We're waiting in line, it was me and several other college journalists that were going out of their way to be cool to college kids at this show. And basically Public Enemy was one of the openers. It was Public Enemy and the Sugar Cubes, and we had to miss them. But while we're waiting, Flavor Flav comes out of a car, and he's like, and I swear to God, you know how he says, "What time is it?" with the big clock? He literally had to ask us what time it was because he was almost late for the show. And he comes out of the car and he goes, what time is it? And I'm like, no way. And I thought he was joking, like he's a character. And he's really like, no, man, seriously, what time is it? I got to get backstage. And so anyway, so he gets in there and we missed the performance of Public Enemy. But then they take us finally, they say, okay, everybody follow us. And this lady leads us down all these long hallways and tunnels and whatever. This is at Texas Stadium where the Cowboys play. And finally she leads us up the spiral staircase and we get out and it turns out we're on stage. Like usually like camera people are down in a pit looking up at the stage. We were on the stage and it was before the concert. We get to see it from the band's point of view, like 50,000 people, just wild, right? And I have a date in the stands somewhere, I have no idea, I had to split up from her in order to, get back there. And so we're waiting for the show. Somebody sees me from TCU, starts chanting TCU. And I'm like, yeah. And so the concert starts and they let us be on stage for the first 3 songs. And then we were supposed to like be taken away, but take all the photos we could for 3 songs. And this is the Octoon Baby tour. And so each of us was put in a little boxed area, like 6 people across the front of the stage. And Bono comes dancing up to each of us during the 3rd song, right before we're gonna have to stop taking photos. And it was even better than the real thing. So he's dancing around, shaking, everybody's taking pictures. And I decided to take advantage of the whole situation. And I had attached to my arm by rubber bands, like 6 cameras. People were begging me to take pictures for them, right? So I had the school's official camera around my neck. And I had 6 disposable cameras on my arm. And Bono comes dancing up. And there's a limited amount of time. I mean, the song is only so long. And I'm the jerk who has to go, oh, wait. I've snapped one picture, then the next camera, then the next camera. And he's singing and dancing, but he's looking like he's doing this look like, mate, time to wrap this up. And finally I get to the real camera, the one that mattered, and the flash bulb wouldn't go off. And I'm standing there like, wait. And he's right in my face and he almost starts laughing. And finally it goes off and he spins away. Okay, so we get taken off the stage. I get back to my date and she goes, oh my God, I saw you. And I thought she meant like a speck on stage. I didn't get what she meant. The next morning I get like 50 phone calls. Dude, we saw you at the concert. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, you didn't know you were on the screen. And I'm like, what? And what it turned out was, because it was Zoo TV theme and it was messing with futuristic media, Bob had a secret camera in his microphone. And so for each person that he was dancing in front of, he was projecting us on the screen. Everyone else got to look cool, like seasoned paparazzi. And I, meanwhile, looked like a cheap spaz because I'm freaking out with all these other cameras and not knowing how to get a flash bulb to go off. And so I'm being the full concert. It was unbelievable.
That's incredible.
But,
wow.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so enough about that. What about let's get into the things that are some of your favorite funny things. Like, you mentioned that your favorite funny movies are either The In-Laws with Peter Falk, correct?
Yes. Oh, not the remake. The original.
Yeah, or Broadcast News, you said.
Yes, I love those 2 movies.
Yeah, so what do you like about them that do you think will make them stand out?
I think that what I loved with The In-Laws was the whole time you didn't know if Peter Falk was just crazy or what was happening. And it was really, it was almost like a mystery along with it. So it was really very cleverly done. And his character was so charming and yet insane, which was really delightful. And I love that he that the Bay that it came out during the script like that the Bay of Pigs invasion was his idea and so on. I just thought Alan Arkin and Peter Falk were so great together. I thought that their chemistry was great, and the that movie really still holds up for me.
Yeah, well, one thing I remember is I highly recommend watching the movie. A lot of people probably don't know it anymore, but especially younger people. But 1979 version, not 2003. That one's okay, but nowhere near as good. It has Michael Douglas.
Yeah.
But yeah, but remember that when they're running from guys shooting at them, Peter Falk is yelling "Serpentine, serpentine," and they start running like a snake in circles, or like S's, to avoid bullets. And so I've always thought, like I work at Walmart now, sadly, and in the safety training video, there's the trying to teach us what to do if you're an active shooter, and all I could think is serpentine, serpentine.
Well, especially where he's almost to safety and he's yelling serpentine, so he goes back and starts again, and this time he's doing serpentine.
Yeah.
It's so.
So then broadcast news, that's kind of a dramedy though, as I recall.
There's
a lot of...
I guess so. It's interesting. One of the screenplay books, they talk about what kind of movie you should be writing, and they say write down your 3 favorite movies, and see what they have in common. And I love The Sting. I love broadcast news. I love The Man Who Would Be King, and for some reason, all my movies, it's somebody posing as something that they're not. So I don't know if I have imposter syndrome or something like that, but for whatever reason, I'm drawn to stories like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, and broadcast news, for those who don't know, 1987, William Hurt, Holly Hunter, Albert Brooks, and it's written and directed by a brilliant guy named James L. Brooks, who's also one of the producers of The Simpsons, but he was known for just amazing human life story kind of movies. And yeah, it's a great movie. I mean, there's some really funny moments, but I do like it's about whether a new hotshot, handsome hunk of a newsman is really as good as he seems he is, or is there something shady about him? And it's a very interesting movie. Yeah. So then, as far as TV, you mentioned Bob Newhart. Are you talking about the Bob Newhart show where he played the psychiatrist, or Newhart the inn owner, or both, or what?
I didn't watch the Inn Owner show, but I loved the Bob Newhart with the psychologist, and I loved his stand-up, and I used to listen to his albums. And when he was one of my heroes as a kid. And then when we did it, when Conan was hosting the Emmys the first time, we did a bit with Bob Newhart, and the premise was we didn't want the show to go long, so that we were going to put the show should only be hours. We didn't want the show to run long, so we were going to put beloved TV icon Bob Newhart in this tube that only had 3 hours worth of air. And if the show ran long, then he would die. That was the premise. So to show him this bit, Conan had me stand in as Bob Newhart. So I got in the tube, and Bob Newhart's off stage. This is during rehearsal, watching me on the monitor play him while we were rehearsing this bit. So that was like a kind of a cool moment to have Bob Newhart watching me pretend to be him.
Wow, that's wild. And what about the Dick Van Dyke Show? That's your other favorite funny?
Yeah, I was, as a kid, I wanted to be a comedian, but this is, when I was a little kid, there weren't comedy clubs or anything that I knew of. I never heard of anything like that. I didn't know anybody who was a comedian, or I didn't know how people became comedians. But I did watch the Dick Van Dyke Show, and he was a comedy writer. So I knew that shows had writers. So when I was, 12 years old or whatever, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to go and I want to write comedy. So that show really inspired me and influenced me. And I'll tell you this. All right. So this is my Conan story that I shouldn't tell it, but so Dick Van Dyke was, he was one of my heroes. He's the reason I got my job at Conan and all that stuff. But he was on this show in the 90s called
Diagnosis Murder, right?
Yes. And it was a show on CBS, and what was he a medical examiner or something?
I thought he was just a doctor. I don't
Okay,
know.
doctor, but for some reason he was solving murders or whatever.
Yeah.
So the show had he was an older gentleman. The audience was very old, and we did a joke because CBS announced that they were canceling Diagnosis Murder. And I wrote this joke of they decided to cancel the show when they realized that all their viewers had died 4 years ago. So that, something like that. That was the joke. So Entertainment Weekly picked up the joke and they printed it in their magazine. And apparently Dick Van Dyke saw it and was very offended.
Oh
And
no.
Conan had to write him an apology letter. So here I am, like offending my hero and making him mad. It was like I was mortified. So, and I got to meet him a few years later when he did the show, and I didn't mention that I had written that joke that had bummed him out. But
Oh man.
I was so bummed out that that I had offended him.
That reminds me, I like to throw in stories when it fits also. And the first time I ever got to perform in a club, I opened for Wendy Liebman by pure happenstance. A comedian for some reason didn't show up. And they said, "Do you want to go up?" And they'd see me at an open mic the week before. And there was, boom, thrill of a lifetime, petrified, of course. And from a packed crowd, Chicago Improv. And what Matlock had just been canceled, the Andy Griffith show that had an audience that was probably as old or older than that Dick Van Dyke show. And I said, "Oh, so Matlock just got canceled today. I guess that proves that there's a God." And not the best joke, but I was 25 and just starting. I say that, and I got a kind of a titter from the crowd. But one thing always stood out for me: an old lady in the front row goes, "Oh no, not Matlock!" and, and Wendy just gave me this look as I came off stage, like, "Yeah, thanks for setting the mood." So yeah. Okay, so I just have a couple more. I guess as far as your books, you said that you like Woody Allen's books, Without Feathers and Side Effects. You were saying sorry for liking Woody. I'm kind of torn about that, but tell me first, then tell me, if you have any thoughts. Do you really feel guilty?
It was hard to have heroes these days, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what happened, if anything happened. I don't know if he's guilty or not. But he was a brilliant guy. He was a brilliant comedian. He had his movies. He wrote these really funny books. He was a huge influence of mine. Um, I used to love Bill Cosby. So
You scalawag.
but we didn't. It's like nobody knew like what Bill Cosby was up to, and like he had these funny albums, and I used to play them for my kids when they were little, like if we were on a long road trip. And thank God for Bob Newhart, like that there's been no scandal with him. There's nothing, he's such a upstanding guy. But
Oh, give it time. Give it time. Okay.
no, please no. But it's hard to have, you know, it's hard to talk about your heroes now. It's so funny because I have a friend of mine who graduated from the same college I did a couple of years later, and the commencement speaker was Bill Cosby.
Oh
And it's
no.
just kind of funny where it's like, at the time that was like what a great coup that we got Bill Cosby, and now it's like, oh God, we had Bill Cosby. So it's
Yeah,
hard
good
to hear
job.
anymore.
Well, I guess I'll just end with a couple of personal stories that you had mentioned. I was asking what's something that comedy helps you get through, and you mentioned, I'm sure this is a more serious moment, but of course, when your mother passed. So how did that help you in that regard?
Oh, well, I think it was a good distraction for me. I was 22 and I was starting out in comedy, and I didn't feel like going on,
Yeah.
most of those times, but it was actually good for me to get up on stage and get some laughs, and I think that was kind of part of the healing process, and I think that actually, um, although it was difficult, it was a nice distraction and a nice way to kind of help me through the grieving process, I would say.
Sure. And then finally, I guess I was asking if you had a favorite funny moment from marriage and fatherhood, and you said the beach when your kids were little.
Yeah, there was that, I could tell you funny stories about my kids all day, but one of my favorites was when my kids were little. I think they were like 4 and 2. We're at the beach, and then it was time to go, and so we were packing up, and my son said, well, I have to go to the bathroom. And it's like, well, there's the ocean. Go in the ocean. So we're packing up, and then we look over, and my son has his toes in the water, his bathing suit around his ankles, and he's just peeing in the
Oh
ocean.
no.
It's like,
Oh no.
wasn't really what we wasn't what I meant.
He wasn't the sharpest kid in the family. I know.
Well, he was only 4. Like, I remember that year, like there was a Halloween parade, and so all the little kids were in their costumes, whatever, and he was Batman, and people would say, "Hi, Batman," and he would lift up his mask and say, "I'm not really him." Which, like,
That's cute.
so yeah, there was a lot of there's a lot of funny moments with my kids. I remember we were at mass on Christmas Day, and it was after communion, and the priest is sitting behind and the priest sneezed. Oh, the Pope sneezed. It's like, well, that's not actually the Pope. That's just that's just Father Burke.
Yeah. Well, hey, so I'm running out of time here, so I just want to say thank you for taking part, and good luck with everything. And people check out, Brian.
For me.
Say what?
Say hi to Fraser Smith for me.
Oh, I will. Absolutely. He's the next guest. So yeah.
Now, is he just waiting in line for parking, and you're just going to go interview him?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, the internet parking lot. But and also the other fine part of doing your folks' house is that my mom's been calling me to dinner like 3 times during this interview. So I better eat really fast before I get on with Fraser. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right,
till next time, folks. This has been Favorite Funny. I'm Carl Kozlowski.
Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.
Okay, buddy. Bye.